Right now, you are doing something almost no human could do for the first 290,000 years of our species. You closed a door, maybe you locked it. The lights are off or low. There is a wall between you and everyone you know. No one can see your face. No one can hear what you say next. You are, for this moment, completely unwatched. That feeling of being sealed off from every other human is one of the newest things a person has ever felt. Newer than farming, newer than the wheel, newer than the written word. And your ancestors would not have understood it at all. Here's what most people get wrong. We assume ancient humans simply lacked privacy, that they wanted it the way you want it and just couldn't build the walls. That's not what happened. They didn't lack privacy. They solved it. They solved it with something far more sophisticated than a door, something you still use every single day without ever knowing its name. And the strangest part is this. The thing they invented worked better than your walls do. We are the ones who broke it. So what did humans actually do for 99% of our history with no privacy at all? The answer is stranger than you'd expect. Start with the simple physical fact of it. In the early 1990s, the Oxford anthropologist Robin Dunbar pulled together decades of field data on hunter-gatherer groups around the world. The picture that came out was remarkably consistent. The basic human living unit, the overnight camp group, was small, somewhere between 25 and 50 people, and they lived close. Not close like neighbors. Close like a family in one room, except the room had no walls. Picture it, 15, 30, 40 people, one fire. No partitions, no bedrooms, no corner that belonged to anyone. The space your entire life happened in was maybe the length of a bus. Now run your own day through that filter. Every argument you had, the group heard. Every time you cried, they saw it. When you got sick, they knew before you said a word. When you wanted someone, you wanted them inside that same small circle with 40 pairs of eyes and nowhere to take it. And here's the part that changes everything. This wasn't the life of the poor or the unlucky. There were no rich people with cabins. The best hunter lived this way. The oldest, wisest elder lived this way. The leader of the band lived this way. No one had a private space, because the idea of a private space had not been invented yet. So they faced a problem you have never once had to solve. How do you have a real private moment when you cannot leave, cannot hide, and cannot be unseen? You can't build a wall. You have no wood, no stone, no door. You have only one material to work with, each other. And what they built out of that material is the thing we lost. Look at the hardest case first. Sleep. The most defenseless thing a human does. In 2017, an anthropologist named David Samson, then at the University of Toronto, published a study in the journal Proceedings of the Royal Society B. He and his team had spent weeks with the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer people in northern Tanzania whose way of life is one of the closest living windows we have onto the deep past. They strapped small motion trackers to 33 adults and recorded how they slept. What they found is something almost no modern person ever experiences. The group almost never slept at the same time. Across roughly 200 hours of recording, 13,000 minutes, there were only 18 minutes when every adult was asleep at once. 18 out of 13,000. For more than 99% of the night, somebody was awake. The older you were, the earlier you woke. The younger you were, the later you stayed up. No one organized it. It simply happened because human bodies run on different clocks, and the result was a group that guarded itself in its sleep without a single guard ever being posted. Researchers call it the Sentinel effect. But sit with what that means for privacy. You are never asleep in an empty room. Someone is always awake near you. Always. The most exposed hours of your life, every night in front of others. And it gets stranger, because inside that exposure, they still found a way to be alone. When the fire burned down, the meaning of the dark changed. It became a kind of agreement. You could move a short distance from the group into the black, and the rule, never spoken, never written, was that no one followed and no one asked. The darkness wasn't really hiding you. Everyone knew roughly where you were. They had simply agreed not to know. And that agreement is the thing. That is the invention. In 1963, the sociologist Erving Goffman gave it a name. In a book called Behavior in Public Places, he was watching modern people on sidewalks and in train cars, but he had stumbled onto something ancient. He noticed that when two strangers pass each other closely, they perform a tiny ritual. A quick glance, just enough to say, I see you, you're a person, I'm not a threat, and then both of them drop their eyes and look away. Not ignoring each other, not staring, something in between. Goffman called it civil inattention. You do this hundreds of times a day, in the elevator, on the street, in the seat next to a stranger on a train. You give them a flicker of recognition, and then you grant them the gift of pretending not to watch. It is so automatic you have never noticed you're doing it. But it is one of the most powerful things a human being does. Because this is what privacy actually is. Not the wall, the averted gaze. Privacy was never really about being unseen. It was about being unwatched, about living among people who could see you and chose not to look. The hunter-gatherer band ran on this. They had no doors, so they made doors out of attention. You don't comment on what you pretended not to see. You don't raise in daylight what the dark covered. The people who lived with these groups noticed it again and again, whole communities with no word for privacy, not because they were simple, but because they didn't need a word for the air they breathed. Think about what that gave them. You could be fully exposed and fully held at the same time. Seen by everyone, judged by no one, watched over without being watched. 40 people knew your whole life, and 40 people had agreed every day to look away at the right moments. That is a more sophisticated form of privacy than any lock has ever produced. It runs entirely on trust, and it only works if the people around you choose again and again to be discreet. That is the thing we lost, and here's how we lost it. Now, to be fair, the wall was not a mistake. Around 10,000 years ago, humans started farming, and farming meant staying put, and staying put meant building. For the first time, you could be in a space no one else could see into, and mainstream historians will tell you, correctly, that this was progress. The private room gave us hygiene. It gave us safety. It gave us a place to think, to read, to become an individual instead of only a member of a group. The architect and historian Witold Rybczynski showed that for most of recorded history, privacy simply did not exist. Servants slept beside their masters. Whole families shared a single bed, and the private bedroom you woke up in is a recent luxury, barely a century or two old for ordinary people. So yes, the wall solved real problems. I'm not telling you to tear them down, but here's the part nobody talks about. The wall and the averted gaze are not the same thing. One gives you absence. The other gives you discretion. The forager had no absence and total discretion, never alone, never watched. We built the opposite. We got the absence. We got the empty room. And then we filled it with eyes, because look at what the empty room actually holds now. The phone on your nightstand has a camera and a microphone, and it does not sleep when you sleep. The speaker on your shelf is listening for its name. Every message you send is stored. Every place you go is logged. Everything you pause on is measured and sold. You are, in this sealed and private room, watched more closely than any hunter-gatherer was ever watched by the people sitting beside him at the fire. But here's the difference that should keep you up at night. The people at the fire looked away. That was the whole deal. They saw you, and they chose discretion. The machines never look away. They have no concept of civil inattention. They cannot pretend not to notice, because noticing is the entire reason they exist. Goffman's averted gaze, the invisible door humans built 300,000 years ago, does not work on a camera. So here is where we've ended up. For 290,000 years, humans were never alone and never truly watched. They built closeness out of proximity and protected it with discretion. Then we built walls to get the solitude they never had, and we got it. The average adult today spends more time alone than any human who has ever lived. The World Health Organization now calls loneliness a global health threat, linked to around 870,000 deaths a year, roughly 100 lives every hour, with a toll on the body one former U.S. Surgeon General compared to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We are the most private humans in history. We are also the most watched, and we are the loneliest. Your ancestors were never alone, and they were never truly watched. You might be the first human who is both. You built a room no one can enter, and then you filled it with eyes that never close.